Good morning. We're learning is the schus for Shlema Filana Chaya Baserach. We're on the bottom of Chav Dalet Amud Aleph. Boy Rava. Rava asked the following question. Isaron, we're going on this din that we said that if you have an Isaron, which is the size of a mincha, that can divide it into two parts, that we said if it's in the Kli Mitzarfai, that it puts the two of them together, the two pieces together, that if one part becomes Tameh, the other part's going to become Tameh. Vayrab, Itzaron Shecholku. You have again this case of a mincha that is divided into two parts, and one part became Tameh, V'nitma Echad Mehen, and one of them became Tameh. One of the two halves became Tameh. V'hinichai, but he didn't put it into the Kli yet. Then V'hinicha Bekisa. After it became Tameh, he put it into a Kli. So we have been talking about this din of Kli Mitzaref. That a Kli is Mitzaref, that means if two pieces, two halves are in a Kli, and something touches it, a Tameh touches it, a Tvil touches it, then the other half will also become Tameh. But that's only if it becomes Tameh while it's in the Kli. If it became Tameh beforehand, and then you put the two pieces, the two halves together into a Kli, the din of Kli Mitzaref will not apply. No svara to it. This is the rule. The din of Kli Mitzaref is only when it became Tameh in the Kli, not if half of it became Tameh out of the Kli and then joined together. Good morning, Menachos. We're on the two dots at the bottom of Chav Dalet Amud Aleph. Boy Rava, Isaron Shecholku, you have two Israelim, a Isaron that was divided up into two halves, and one of the halves became Tameh, and then you put it into a Kli. So like we were just saying, the din of Kli Mitzaref does not apply when something becomes Tameh before it joined with the other half in the Kli. It only will apply if it becomes Tameh in the Kli. So what happened? This piece that half was Tameh and half was not, but the Tumah did not spread from one half to the other, even though in the same Kli, because the Tumah had been applied to one half before it came into the Kli, and now a Tameh went and touched that half. Mao. What's it then? Miaminin Savalei Tumah. Do we say, since it was already Tameh, now when someone touches it, when a Tameh touches it, again, it doesn't become more Tameh. So you can't reinvigorate and restart the clock and say, now it became Tameh while it's in the Kli. It was already Tameh. So this new Tumah does not do anything. I lie, or maybe no. It was already Tameh, but now it gets the additional Maila. It becomes stronger in the sense that it's going to have the din of Kli Mitzaref as if it had become Tameh in the Kli, because even though it didn't become Tameh, but had it not become Tameh, it would have become Tameh when the Tameh touched it, when the Tvil touched it. Amalei Abaye. Abaye asked, do we really say such a thing that once Tuma is in something, then it cannot get an additional Tuma on it? It cannot become Tameh legabe this din of that it's going to be Kli Mitzaref. The Kli is going to be Mitzaref the Tameh. Vatnan. Sadin Tameh, if you have a mat that's Tameh. Tameh Tumis Midris, an Amud Beis. So there's a special din that when a Zav reclines or sits on something that is intended to be used as a sitting or lying, something that a person is normally reclines on or puts his weight on, it gets a special tumah of tumah midras. Doesn't have to touch it, just from the lying on it. Vaso vilan. So it became Tameh Tumas Midras by the Zav lying on it, but then they changed the idea. It was supposed to be a mat, but they said, I'm hanging it up as a curtain. It's going to be a drape to block the window. Once it becomes a drape, it's no longer competent to become Tameh Tumas Midras. Only something that is intended for reclining on, for bearing a person's weight, can become Tameh Tumas Midras. Even though this was already Tameh, it loses its Tumah. Very similar to what we know that a Kli can be Makabel Tumah if it gets broken, so it loses its ability to be Makabel Tumah. So the Tamei Tumah Midras, when it changes its usage, when it's no longer used as something to bear a person's weight, it loses that Tumah. Tar. Tar mina midras. It becomes tar from the midras. Avol tome maga midras. A tome tumas midras. This tumas midras is a is an avatuma, and something that touches it also becomes tummy. So we say this mat, or now becoming a drape, even though it's not tummy tumas midras, it did touch a midras because it itself was a midras. So it retains the second level type of tumah. It doesn't have the avatuma of the midras, but it's treated as if it touched the midras. Amr Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi said, "V'chi be'ezeh midras nagazeh." What midras did it touch? It didn't touch anything. It can't be considered to touch itself. Ella, what it must mean is shem naga by hazav tame mage hazav. When it's talking about where a zav touched it after the zav reclined on it. So when the zav reclined on it, it got tummy tumas midras, the chamadika type of tumah. Then when the zav touched it, it got the regular tummy of tumah negia. But the mashmayis of Rabbi Yosi is when the zav touches it, that does make it tummy, even though it was already tummy in a more chamadika tumah of tumah midras. Even after it was already tummy tumas midras. According to what we had suggested, it should be, since it's a tummy tumas midras, it can't absorb a second tumah. So if we say legabi the half of an isaron, that since it's already tamei before it went into the kli, it can't absorb a tumah. So why don't we say over here also, once it's tamei tumah midras, it can't absorb a din of tumah zav that will survive even when it loses its designation as something you recline on, which takes away the tumas midras and leaves you with the lesser tumah of tumah that it was touched by a zav. Why don't we say the tumah that came from being touched by a zav never adhered to this whatever it is, this vilan, or this mat or this drape. Amalei, my dahaishem nagabay azav labasa midras. He says, how do you know? No, it's not talking about where it was touched by a zav after it became tummy midras from treading upon it. Dilma makami midras dahavituma dechamura al tumach kala. Maybe it's the other way around. First, it became tummy tumas magazav, so that adhered to this object, to this mat, and then afterwards the zav reclined on it, and that was an upgrade in tumah. There's no question that you could have a more chamadika tumah applied to a lesser tumah. You could always have something become more tummy. Our question only was whether something that already is tummy, can it get the same or a lesser tumah attached to it. But over here we're talking about where the tumah's chamura came after the tumah kala, which will certainly apply, and then the tumah kala applied before it. But a bayas, where both of them are a tumah kala, you can't have that the tumah of the tvul yaim touching the half of an isaron can be reinvigorated when it's touched by the tvul yaim in the kli to be metama the other half. It's the same tumah, so therefore it's savalit tumah. So let me say. So Abai says, no, I have a question not from that part of the brisa, but from the seif of that brisa. We say Moida Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi is Moida. Rabbi Yosi had asked before that Be'ezin Midrash Naga, Shem Naga by Azav, Tame Maga Azav. He had said, how can it become Tame in the original case of where the Zav touched it again? If you have two mats that one are on top of the other, they're folded over and one on top of the other. I don't know why they folded over. V'yashav zav alein, and the zav sat on them. Sha'elyon tamei midras, the top one that he reclined on his tamei midras. V'atachten tamei midras umaga midras, and the bottom one, in addition to being itself tamei midras, also gets a tamei because it's touching the one on top that was a maga midras. That the top one was a midras, so it became an avatum, and the bottom one gets two tumas at the same time. He gets a tumah of the midras because the zav was lying on it, as well as from the fact that it was touching the top one. Why do we say that the second one can get the second tumah? And the reason why we're saying it gets the second tumah, then afkamina will be if it becomes later on, it gets reclassified from being a mat that people lie on to being a drape, that it will lose its tumah madras, but the second one will get the tumah of maga madras. But for the Gemara, according to you, that you say savale tumah, that once it absorbs one tumah, it can't get the other. How can it get the tumah of maga madras since it's already a midras? It's a more kaldik a tumah. It shouldn't apply. It shouldn't become part of this mat. The Gemara hasam b'vasachas hacha b'zeh. He says that which we say savale tuma, that it can't get two tumas at the same time, can't get a second tuma. That's only when it's one after the other. But in that case, at the same time that he's lying on the top mat and causing it to become midras, that he's also lying on the second mat, and the second mat at the same time is touching the first mat. That's all happening at one time. So then you can have two separate tumas applying at the same time. Amar Rabba, Isaran shecholku. An Isaran, a mincha of an Isaran, that you divide it up into two parts. Va'avad echad mehen, and one of the halves got lost. So now you only have a half of an Isaran left for your mincha. You need a whole Isaran. So v'hivrish acha tachtav. So he went and he separated a third half of an Isaran to complete the original one. So you have three parts here to this mincha. You have the rishon, which is the original part that nothing ever happened to, the first half. Then you have the second half that got lost. And then v'nimtza rishon, and then you found that v'nimtza, and you found it. You found the first one that was lost. So you have the rishon, which was the original one that nothing happened to. You have the second half that got lost and then found, which is called the avod. And then you have the hefresh, the one that you had set aside while the second half was lost. That's the third half. And all three halves are in the same kli. Nitma avod. So we know for sure one half, the first half, the rishon is part of this mincha, but the other two, you have to choose which one you're going to use. So they're all three are in the kli, and nitma avad, and the avad, the second one, the one that was lost and then found again, became tummy. Avad v'rishon mitzdarfen. So we say the din of tzir of kli that we had said on the previous summit, that two halves of a mincha that are in the same kli, they both become tummy, but it has to be part of the same mincha. If it's not part of the mincha, you don't have that din of tzir of kli. But since over here, since the Ovid became Tameh, we say the Ovid and the Rishon both become Tameh, because we say they're the two halves that we know that the Ovid, the Rishon was always intended to be part of it, and the Ovid is also part of it. Mufresh Emetzdarf, but the Mufresh was never intended to be as part of the same mincha with the Ovid. They're just alternatives, so it's not Metama. The tumah doesn't go from the avatim to the mufresh. Nitma mufresh rishon mitzvah and avadim mitzvah. And the same thing the other way around. If the mufresh, the third one, became tamei, so it's going to be mitzvah with the first one, with the rishon, but the avid will not be mitzvah. Nitma rishon, but if the first one became tamei, the rishon, then shneim mitzvah. Then both of them are going to become mitzvah with the first one. So since they were together as they were intended to be a mincha together, each one on its own, so they're each going to be mitzdarf with the first one, and to be metama. Abaya disagrees. Afilu nitma echad mehen. He says even if one of the two, meaning the Ovid or the Mufresh, the second or the third one, become Tameh, Shneim Mitzdarfin. They're still going to be Mitzdarf, the two, it's going to be Mitzdarf, and certainly with the Rishon, my Tameh Kulu B'nei Biksa Da Dadininu. Says it doesn't make a difference that it was intended necessarily to be a mincha only with one of them, but they're all in the same kli, and they're all intending to. They're all using. They're all part of the same kli, and we don't care which one specifically you're intending to make in a mincha together. In the end, you were going to make a mincha from all three of them at one point or the other. That's what we say l'gabe tumah. B'chein le'inyan kmitza, and there'll be a similar discussion between Abaya and Rava l'gabe kmitza. So we had the same case. You had a Rishon, and then the second one got lost, and then then you designated your mafresh a third one, and then you found the second one. So kametz mina ovid. After that all happened, he took kmitza. They had them all in the same kli, and he did kmitza from the lost one. Shi'arav v'rishain nechalin. The shi'arim of this ovid, and together with the first one, can be eaten, because we say that's the real Isaron. He always was intending to use the first one, and now he said, I'm using the ovid as the second half, so that's my mincha, and the shiarim become mutter. Mufresh ain't an echel, but the shiarim of the mufresh are not able to be eaten. He's going to have to go get another half and make that into a new mincha and make a kmitza from it. Kametz min ha-mufresh, shiarim v'rish nechal, and ovid ain't an echel. The same thing will be the other way on if he took from the mufresh, from the third one. Kametz min ha-rishon, if it's kametz from the rishon, shneim ein nechalim. In that case, we don't know which one is the kametz and which one. We don't know if the kmitza is going to apply to the second one or the third one, right? Because he never designated which one it is. So you're not going to be able to eat the shirayim of either one. You can eat the shirayim of the first half of the kametz, but not of the other two. Abaya amar afilu kametz me'echad mehen, even if it was kametz from either one, either the avid or the mufresh, shneim ein nechalin. Even so, you can't eat from the other one, even from the one that you are mafresh from. You can only eat from the rishon. My time, akulu nami nebiksa dadadinenu. Since they're all in the same kli, you cannot determine. You don't. You can't determine. They all really are part of this man. He says your intentions don't change it from one to the other. So there, when you do, it's not and no part. We don't know which part he intended to use, even though the first part he had intended from the beginning. Maybe he wants to do now from the Sheni and the Shlishi. So therefore, we don't know that any part is for sure part of this. This kmitza is going to apply to it. So whichever the other two are, you're not going to be able to eat the shirayim of it.
We're talking about where each of the three halves has enough for the shear of mincha?
No, each one is half of a mincha.
Each one is a half.
We have 150% altogether of the amount.
Okay.
So we want to, but we have to, and you can't have more than a nisaron in the mincha. That means you can't have more than two halves worth. You can't have a mincha with three halves. You can't make an extra big mincha. You can't make a small mincha. So we're trying to determine which two are the ones we have in mind to include. Maskef Lara Papa B'Shirayim Didei Mia Nechalim was saying, even though according to Rava and all we say where you do the kmitza on the first half, on the rishon, then it itself is going to be oichel, and on Abaya we say in all three that the one that you took it from you could eat, but not the others. Ikadanka the kaimet still a carve. You still have when you do the kmitza, that kmitza is intended for all three. So you have a third, even though we call it a danka, what it really means is a third. Danka means a sixth, but in this context it means a third. You have a third of the kaimetz that is applied to part of a mincha that is not being bought. Since he says the kmitza is going to all three. So one third of that kaimetz is ineligible to be brought on the mizbech. And Maskar of Yitzchak Breder of Misharsha, even more of a kaimetz gufe heichi karev. How could you even, forgetting about the shirayim, the kaimetz itself can't be brought on the mizbech. A third of it that you intended for the part of the mincha that's not actually the half that's not being bought, that's going to be a part of it's going to be chulin that you can't put on the mizbech. Sagt Gemara, Ravashi Yama comments medayt the kain talia milsa. The kain ki comments are sanka comments. So Gemara, no, we don't worry about the portion of the comments that's going intended for the third half, because that third half the kain never had in mind. It depends on what the kain has in mind. So what we don't know what he has in mind, so we have to be chayshish that it could have been one of the others. But he's only chayshish. He's only having in mind one isaron altogether. So the third quarter. The third half is not going to be relevant to passel the actual kaimetz. Zok the Mishnah, Chav Hayamanal, Nitma HaKaimetz. If the kaimetz, now we're going to move on to a different din. We're going on to the din of tzitz meratza. So the din of tzitz meratza, it gets confused sometimes, but the din of the tzitz meratza is generally that when something becomes tamei in the Beis Hamikdash, if part of a carbon becomes tamei, you're not allowed to then bring it on the mizbeach. Let's say the dam becomes tamei or the imur become tamei, you can't bring it on the mizbeach. But if you do bring it on the mizbeach, the tzitz is meratza and it's accepted. So Zok Gemara, nitma hakaimetz. So the kaimetz of a mincha became tamei. Vikrivu, so you're not really allowed to, when it becomes tamei, you're not allowed to bring it on the mizbeach. Hatzitz meratza, the tzitz is meratza that it will remain on the mizbeach and it will be a good kaimetz, and the person who brought the mincha will get a kapar. Yotza vikrivu. If instead of being tamei, he was moitzi, he brought the silas, he brought the kaimetz outside of the azara, which is a psul yaitze, passes the kaimetz. Ein atzitz meratza. That the tzitz is not going to affect. Shatzitz meratza la tomev, ein meratza la yaitze. Tzitz is only meratza. It only helps something that became tamei. It does not help for any other psul. The Gemara is going to go through all the other psulim and say, well, maybe that's what, when the pasuk says that the tzitz meratza, why isn't it on any other thing? But we conclude it's only on a tamei. Zaktumar, Tanurabah, Binasa Aaron Asavayna Kachim. The Aaron with his tzitz will bear and take away the sin of the kachim. What is it being meratza? Obviously, it's going to end up, it's going to say it's going to be meratza on tumah. But we're going to have to get there the long way. Imtaima avoin pigel. So I don't know if anyone remembers this, but back when we learned this was brought in Psachim and Yuma, and most recently in Zvachim. This is a strange case where Avoin Pigel in this context is a reference to Machshavas Chutzlum Kaima. Normally, Avoin Pigel is Machshavas Chutzlum Kaima. Over here it means Chutzlum Kaima. So if you're talking about someone eating something that had a Machshavas Chutzlum Kaima, which is possible, Harik Farnam Lo Yechashiv. We already said that there's a din of Lo Yechashiv, that it's not going to be, it's going to be possible, and Lo Yechashiv, it's not considered, it's entirely possible, and there's no hartzah on that. There's no cure for that. Now, in this case, Avoy Noiser is a reference to Pigel, a Machshavas Chutz Luzmanim. So maybe it's saying that the tzitz is meratza on that. Harei kfar nema lo yerotza. It says on that also that it's not going to get a ratzah. Hartzah, it's not going to be accepted under any circumstances. Ha'ein noisa elav ein tumah. So what is left? It's going to be meratza on tumah. Shehocher meklol with tzibur. And why do I pick tumah from all the psulim? We're going to see a bunch of other psulim because tumah, in addition to the kayin gadol being meratza on it when it was mistakenly brought, it's also hotra mechlala b'tzibur that if tumah is something, a carbon tzibur becomes tamei, it's brought even though it's tamei. So once we see there's one exception, the gabi tumah, we'll make another exception that b'di'eved it will be if you bring something b'tumah, the tzitz is going to be meratz. And in general, it's important to remember. So what happens by a carbon tzibur? Is the tzitz meratza relevant for that? It's anyway tumah hutra b'tzibur. The point is, what's the difference? That tzibur, why do you need tumah hutra b'tzibur if it's anyway the tzitz is meratza? The answer is b'tzibur you bring it even lechatchila. The other tumas yachid, the tzitz is meratza b'di'eved if you proceeded, but you're not supposed to proceed. Tumas tzibur, since it's hutra miklala, since it's hutra, it's going to be brought even lechatchila. In any case, that's the reason why we apply this pasuk of nasa hara and avayna kachim that the tzitz meratza to tumah. Maskala zera ema avayin yaitza. Why? If once you're saying it depends on something that's hutra miklala, that we find exceptions that there are situations where we ignore it. Let's say the isser of taking the dam or the mincha or the kaimitz outside of the azara, outside the Beis Hamikdash, which we know shehocher miklaloi bebama, that even though it's aser, if you do it at time of heter abamas, if you bring it out on bama, it's mutter. Then you could be yaitz, obviously. Amalei Abaye amakra l'rotzen lehem lifnei Hashem. Avoid the lifnei Hashem in, avoid the yaitzel loy. In the same pasuk that said, "V'nasa Aaron es avoid kachim," the exact pasuk was, "V'haya al metzach Aaron." The tzitz is going to be on the fort of Aaron. V'nasa Aaron es avoid kachim, and that will allow Aaron to take away the avoid kachim, which we say is tumah. Asher yakdishu bnei Yisrael l'chol manas kashem. V'haya al mitzchay tamid l'rotzin lehem lifnei Hashem. And the pasuk ends lifnei Hashem in front of Hashem. Yaitza is not lifnei Hashem, so that's excluded. Avoid lifnei Hashem in, avoid the yaitza loy. It excludes the avoin of yaitza. Maskal of loy, ema avoin smile. Let's say the avoin, the isser of doing something with the left hand, shehotu mikol b'yom kippurim, which is mutter on Yom Kippur. Right, that the kohen gadol when he comes in with the maloi chafnav, he has to hold it. He's required to bring in his left hand part of the ketores. Amalei Abaye, amakra avoin. Shahaya boy, but the chisif. The Torah says, oven, that it was something that was wrong, that the tzitz is going to be ratz on something that he did wrong. It has to be an oven, shahaya boy, that there was something that he did incorrectly, but the chisif, and we're saying that the tzitz is meratza. Lafuki Yom Kippurim dechsher b'smal. Yom Kippur, this that the kohen gadol does b'smal, that's a whole different category. That's something that he's required to do with his left hand. It's not comparable to what we've been talking about of something that he did incorrectly. Rav Ashi Amar Avoyin Kachim v'lo Avoyin Hamakdishim. Rav Ashi says, another teretz, it says it has to be a problem with the oven, with the carbon, but not a problem with the one who's doing the avodah. So we're saying when we say that the tzitz is meratza, it has to be something that has to do with the carbon itself. Over here, this is just a problem with that he's bringing it with his left hand. That's a kayim problem. It's not a carbon problem, and that's not what the tzitz is meratza. Amalei Rav Simi Breder Avidil Rav Ashi, V'amila Rav Sima Breder Rav Ashi Rav Ashi, Ve'ema Avoin Balmum Shahutam Mechloli Ba'ifus. Why don't we say that tzitz meratza on Balmum? That we find that by an oif, there's no, when you bring a carbon oif, there's no psul of a Balmum, so it's Hutra Mikloli, just like we said Tumah is Hutra B'tzibur, Balmum is Hutra Mikloli ba'ifus. Damamar tamas v'zakus behema tamas v'zakus ba'ifus. There's no such thing as tamus and or male. We don't look at whether it's male or female by an oif, and we don't look at tamas whether it's complete or whether it's a balmum. So you see that balmum is hosher mikloli ba'ifus. Amalei alecha mikolo yiratza kviloi l'ratzin yelochem. The Torah says that it won't be l'rotz and it won't be merutz, it won't be accepted because it's and it says about this is what it says about a balmum, and it also says there will not be a rotzin for them. We have two separate psukim for that. Both of them are telling you that, like we said before, hartzah is not possible, just like we said by Pigel and we said by chutzum kaimai, that the Torah says l'rotzin. Once the Torah says that it's not going to be hartzah, that tells you that under any circumstances, it's not going to be hartzah through the tzitz. Okay, we'll stop over here. We'll continue a little more with the tzitz. I promise we're getting close to stam. It feels